Let's go ahead and get started with the keynote. We'll be doing a gold medal Jamf tips and tricks challenge between Chris Schasse and Chad Lawson. They'll both be sharing some various tips that they use. One thing to note, this is kind of this is an internal Rocketman keynote presentation. And I say that to say we can kind of keep this a little bit casual. One of the most important things that we do with this meetup is we've got this great community here. We've already done a great job of it in the Gravity Times this week. But if there's ever a month where we're welcoming random questions or thoughts, this is a great month for that, since we don't have a guest speaker coming in from a different company. So feel free to lob out any questions. Just wanted to throw that as an aside. In the meantime, though, Chad versus Chris in a Jamf tips and tricks battle. The winner gets to choose a silly filter for the loser to wear next month. So we're really putting it all out there this month. Chris, Chad, which one of you guys are you guys starting? Are you guys going back and forth like Beastie Boys style? What are we doing here?
Chad's going to be starting for the first 10 minutes, and then I'll be taking over and doing the last 10 minutes. So we're going to start with the reigning champion, the reigning Jamf wizard, Chad.
Most of the items that I have are all kind of related, and they all kind of come from more recent interactions with trying to help out customers. First thing I want to talk about is something I don't think most people think of, and this kind of goes back to even when I was doing the integration, what we used to call jump starts. I believe they're now called onboarding. I am going to grab.
3 hours and 12 minutes.
We should have my.
Jesus Christ.
So this is our Rocketman test server. I want to talk about inventory collection first of all. One of the things. First, I want to spell inventory collection correctly. One of the things I think a lot of people tend to do with inventory collection is just turn everything on. Why wouldn't it be good to grab every single piece of information you can? There are some that have, I love the people shaking their heads. So this may be an easy preaching to the choir. So I won't take as much time. Some of these, like collecting available software updates while useful, does take a fair amount of time. And if for those, I saw the conversation in the chat, those are using Super. Already can get that information when Super runs on its cycle. You can pull it from one of the Super Friends extension attributes. But the one that I encountered more recently was including home directory sizes, which is just outright painful because it's essentially, remember that a lot of the stuff that comes from the Jamf management framework goes back to Jamf creating all these different scripted tools. And this is, again, just like others. I'm going to switch my share to my terminal window. And as an example of whenever you run, it does, if you do a recon with the collecting home directory sizes, it looks something like this. If I were to do,
And so when
there we go, CD to /users, and I'll do just for the administrator account here. This is essentially what it is running the entire time that you do that. So if you do a recon while you've got that turned on and you're like, why is this moving into the beyond seconds into minutes and what feels like, if you're waiting for a recon, hours, it's because it has to do that for each and every single user. And if you have the other option for include hidden users, it's also going to include all of that. So it's time consuming, and I'm actually relatively pleased. Last time I did this example, that took longer. So if my recommendation, especially as you're kind of getting computers or systems set up, is to minimize the amount of things you are collecting data on. Only the things you absolutely need. These days, even collecting printers, if you don't care, and I'm picking up some crosstalk. If you're not actively using it for smart groups or something, disable it if you don't particularly need it. The collecting user from directory services gets handy, and I will actually show in a minute where that can be extremely useful. in my situations. All right, that was number one. Second, of course, I just came back over here in time to go to back to terminal. And if you, just so you know, the one that I'm doing here, this is actually like 4 different tips in one, and it is at least partially based on things Chris and I discussed. So you might want to split credit if this is the one you think is the best. I don't think enough people utilize the, I'm just going to do it this way, the command line tool for Jamf as much as they could or should. There is a lot of capability in here. I have to, in my own humility, recognize that too much of what I do of my scripting involves going back and forth through the API. If I need to just push up certain items to Jamf, there are things I can do straight from here. I mean, first of all, I can do the whole rename the computers, changing passwords if I know it, etc. But doing sudo help recon, there are things like being able to set the asset tag or specify what the full username is. And I want to mention specifically stuff like, in addition to building a department, because the minute I'm running recon, if I include building a department, those recon is what triggers, or a computer submitting inventory is what triggers all of those smart groups to update. So if you have smart groups based on building a department as part of your workflow, just simply including that information there suddenly kicks off the next set of scoped policies and whatnot. The other one that is kind of handy, and I'm watching my time, so I'm not going to do this one after all. I just played with this one the other day as we were really digging into this. If you do the save form 2 and you give it a path, so like say /temp, it will create a file, a .html file in temp, which it's a bit convoluted, but if you have any text editor that parses XML to make it tidy, that's all the data that it sends up to Jamf. So now you can use all of your scripting tools. Instead of having to write a script to say, go up to the API and get this information, I can simply use save form 2, dump it out to the XML or to the HTML, and parse that HTML to get my information. Again, I like to write API scripts, so doing this has definitely made life a little bit easier. But the specific ones I was playing around with are like room and position that don't necessarily always fall into what people think of when it comes to it's 2 fields that I can control from the command line without having to, and therefore within any of my scripts, without having to do an API call that I can then use to trigger smart group management. A lot of the reason that I want to do this is, let's say I have, man, 10 minutes is just not enough for a chatty person like me, is it? Who thought I could pull this off? Especially switching back and forth. Going back in here and talking about different types of extension attributes. So in addition to doing something like room and department, the way I use those in a past environment, and since I saw somebody else mention they were presenting a JNUC, I'm proud to admit that I will be presenting a JNUC specifically on taking over a Jamf system you may or may not have had any fun setting up. So I used in this situation room and position to be able to keep track of computers specifically as to where they were in the refresh workflows. And by setting an extension attribute like inactive types, I can say, oh, why is this computer, my smart groups all being based on when was its last update, its last inventory update, its last check-in. I want to know why this computer isn't checking in when I do that. If somebody says, I need a list of all the computers that are up to the current version of the operating system, I need to know why the computers that aren't. And well, okay, maybe this one happens to be in this situation. And I'm going to blend a couple of tips together to say that we also then have the ability to have a configuration profile, because we talked about sending information to the API, but what about getting information from the API? Is it not on here? It must have been in a different test computer. We can create a configuration profile that uses Jamf's variables, like JSSID, for example, is the one thing. I can't get that from anywhere else on my computer. But all of the information, if you look at Jamf's variables that you can put into a configuration profile, it includes extension attributes. So now I was going to show off creating a configuration profile that has a number of those variables, but what I can show, setting myself right back over to the terminal, is if once I have submitted that, defaults read slash library slash managed preferences tech.rocketman Jamf data, I now have, okay, what's the assigned user, which I just got from username, building, department, an extension attribute I created just for the fun of it, extension attribute example, which you saw was my dropdown that included that this was a secondary computer. But also building position. So with this, instead of having to query the API, I can just simply say within a script and get that information from the configuration profile I already sent myself. And with that, my time is up. But all playing around with different inventory related data, I will hand control back over to Chris.
Woo, great job, Chad. Shmer, shmer, shmer. Woo. All right. So remember that presentation. And now Chris is going to present, and then you're going to have to choose which one did you like more, who has better hair, whatever your voting preferences are. We don't make the rules here, but we will be asking for a vote. So with that said, Chad, great job. Especially great job of putting together a presentation quickly. I know 2 weeks is a quick turnaround. And anytime I ask you to talk about it, something in less than 10 minutes, that's like an insane ask. So great job, Chad. We will kick it over to Christopher Schasse. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
All right. And one thing I'll say before I get started, please don't base your judgments on hair because I will definitely lose. Chad's hair is way cooler than mine, especially with the light in his room.
Chris has got the better beard. So there's that.
The better beard. Please base it on the beard. I need to start this timer, which I'm not sure why this is so hard to start. Oh, we are going. And I got 10 minutes. You'll be able to see it up in the corner there. So let me get started with everyone's favorite topic, simple searches, not as simple as you think. So you probably all know how searches work here. I go ahead and click search and I get all the devices in my inventory. I see a bunch of different inventory items that you may not see because you can customize this in inventory display settings. You probably know that as well. What you may not know is that you can have different inventory displays for different situations. How do you do that? Well, you can create an advanced computer search. So if I create an advanced computer search, let's save this as LaunchPad, and I put no criteria, what it's going to do is it's going to show me all my computers. And that way I can create a custom report with all the types of criteria that I need for any specific purpose. Maybe some extension attributes that I have. And then I can go ahead and view that report, and it's going to view it with all of those things that I'll have to scroll for. Also with that, I'm sure you know about this, but it's worth noting that you can also configure email reports for that if you want to send this inventory once a week to someone outside of Jamf Pro that doesn't have access to Jamf Pro. One other thing to note, very simple. If I, look at some of this stuff here, let's say I wanted to search for any computers that have Hugo in the name. If I type Hugo and a star, it'll show me those computers. If you put that asterisks before, then it will show you the wildcard before the asterisk. But one thing that's really neat that you may not know about is, let's say I have multiple things that I want to search for at the same time. I can take one serial number, put a comma, and put another serial number. And it will search for both. It will give in the results both those serial numbers. So what you may think is, all right, what if someone gives you a report, they want to like do a pilot and they give you, 300 computers in an Excel spreadsheet. And it looks like this. Imagine this is 300 and not 3 computers. But if I open up Excel, which I should have done before this, I'm wasting precious time. But you get a list like this. Okay, well, how can I use that to quickly create a group within Jamf Pro? Well, I can select all the items and then paste this and transpose the values because this is a CSV and CSV are comma separated. I'm going to delete this first page. And then I'm going to save this so it's still a CSV. And then I'm going to open this with a text editor. So now I have 3 serial numbers separated by a comma. So when I search here, I can get those results. And I can do a mass action on that. So before I do, I'm going to create a department. You could also do a building just because you can mass add stuff into a building or department. I'll call this pilot. Click save. Now, when I go ahead and do the search, go to action, edit building or department, and I can go ahead and put it into my pilot group that I created. So this is great if you're creating a pilot or a wave deployment or anything like that. Let's take this to the next level. So let's say I run a policy and oh no, I was installing Google Chrome and there's some failures. And I want to do something so that I can deploy a policy just to these logged failures. Now, there is no way to get those logs through the API or to create a group specifically using the API or any other method within Jamf Pro. I have tried, it is impossible. If it is possible somehow, please tell me, because this is the bane of my existence. But one way you can do it is through simply selecting the text and then going in. Just so you know, if you, let's say you have 300 results, anything up to 1,000, you can show more than just the 25 default here. So you can show up to 1,000. But now I will open up Excel again, paste these values into there, and I'll just select the stuff that I need, which is going to be these 2 values. Just do the same thing again. Expose. Delete this first sheet and then save it. And you'll need to make sure, of course, you save as a CSV. And then again, open that in the text editor. And then, of course, you can again put these into a pilot group or whatever you want. I would probably create another department for this, but just for example's sake, that's how you do that. Of course, you can use a lot of other tools to do this. This is just a quick and dirty way if you don't want to use the API or you don't want to use any other type of tool like the MUT or something like that. All right, so that's kind of a long-winded first tip of mine. Another tip, which this one's super simple. I'm sure a lot of people know about this, but in case you don't, if you have a very complex workflow setup that involves 1 or 2 packages, but it's in multiple policies and trying to update that package is really annoying because you have to update all your policies. Well, you can just go straight into Jamf Pro if you're using Jamf Cloud, and you can just upload the package over another package. So you do not need to upload a new package and then change all your policies. You can upload it right over top of each other if you're using the Jamf Cloud distribution point. So that's my tip number 2. Tip number 3. And this will be a short one, but when you're testing any type of new deployment, let's say you want to deploy a new application that you haven't deployed before and you want to pilot it, test it a little bit, it's a little bit complicated. it might have a lot of configuration profiles and policies and other things that go along with it. So there's a lot of moving parts. Instead of just scoping directly to a computer, like this, where you just select the computer, get in the habit of creating a static group or a department first. So you migrate pilot, bring it to that user that you're going to put it in, and then scope it to that. Migrate pilot. Of course, I got to save this. And I'm running out of time. There you go. By obviously changing the scope to a pilot instead of individual users, you'll make sure that everyone in the pilot gets all the files they need, and you don't get in an embarrassing situation where you deploy it to someone and they don't get the system extensions or other configurations they need for that application to work. Okay. I've got a couple more minutes. One other thing I want to show, let's say you're setting up a zero-touch deployment. And you want to make sure it gets deployed to new computers, but not existing computers. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but one of the simplest ways is creating a smart group that looks at the date it was enrolled. Zero-touch deployment. So take all of your zero-touch policies, 10, 20 of them, whatever you have, and just do it to last enrollment. And then after 2024, look at today's date, and then it will make sure that all your previous users that are already enrolled will not be getting this stuff. You can also do the opposite if you want to exclude the computers that were enrolled before that date. You just change this to before that date. Lastly, and this I'll go through very quickly. Let's say you want documentation guidelines for Jamf Pro. We have a PDF that goes through that. We will link that afterwards. Maybe I'll just throw it in the comments right now. And my time is done there, so I will stop.
Oh, Chris, I'm going to suggest you take a couple more seconds and talk about, especially because the one thing I really love what we've done is those prefixes we have for our static groups. Feel free to take a moment to talk about that, because I can't believe how many clients love that little addition.
All right, Chad's letting me cheat, so I will take advantage of that. So we'll go through this very quickly. We got categories. Here's some of the main categories we like to create. Some of the main ones that I want to point out is this temporary testing, deprecated, and quarantine. It's really important to have, I think, the deprecated one. If you have a policy you're no longer using anymore, make sure you throw it in that deprecated category and disable it and unscope it. And then a testing one, just to allow yourself to know, hey, this isn't in production yet. I'm just testing this. Naming conventions, a lot of different ways you can do this, but we make sure we put a prefix before all our policies, configuration profiles, packages, and scripts. It really just helps keep things organized. We'll also put a suffix if we need to, just to kind of group things together a little bit. Talk about that a little bit more with these packages along with the scripts. Often we do these prefixes and suffixes based on our kind of the workflows we're using and what we're doing them for. And then for the policies, for all of our onboarding policies, love to name things in alphabetical order using this numbering system, because let's say we just do a general Jamf policy, things do install in alphabetical order. So we don't always use it. Sometimes it's just for us to organize things, but sometimes an inventory update will, or not an inventory update, a check-in will run, and it will be able to run all these policies in that correct order. So we just make sure that things don't get out of order if they need to, if there's dependencies. And I talk here about the rules of it, and I will throw this in the chat afterwards, and we'll have a blog post too with these follow-up resources. Smart computer groups. This is less important than it used to be because Jamf actually does some logic to tell you if a smart group is in scope with a policy or something like that. But I still like to use this method of just saying, hey, this is a smart group that's used in the scope of a policy. So be careful if you make changes. One thing I'll point out too, if you remove all the criteria from a smart group, it'll include all computers. So if I've done this before, so don't feel bad. But if you remove all that criteria, all of a sudden it might start running on all computers, even though you thought you were removing the criteria and removing all the computers from it. Only managed computers. That's correct, Mark. So we like to use these naming conventions just to allow us to know, like, we need to be careful with some of these policies. And I like to, have a specific naming convention for API accounts too. This is kind of getting deprecated now that Jamf has put the API accounts into a different area. But with that, I will go ahead and give this to everyone so they can see it. I'll just download this as a PDF and throw it in the chat. With that, I will hand it back to Eric after I've gone way over my time.
Ooh, great job, Chris. Okay, cool. You posted. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you wanted to make a blog out of that so we could share it if that was even an external thing, the documentation standards. So super cool. Okay. So I think we all saw Chris absolutely bring the house down with just a comma. I know that was impactful, but it was never about the information. It was always about the hair. So with that said, Caleb is
You could really just make it beard or hair.
yeah, or anything you want. Remember, the guys, there is a lot riding on this.
Wow, it's crazy watching it in real time. I can just
Yeah,
see
it's a
Chad
little
turning into a fox here.
Yeah, yeah. I should just concede the comma alone. I figured I should just concede watching the chats. Oh, thank you, Chuck. I'll take that at this point.
Foxy Chad is imminent.
There are so many jokes I'm just going to stay out of. So
I think we should do this format
Yeah.
more often.
I agree.
We get pretty, I don't want to say serious, but we try and fit 60 minutes of content into 57 minutes, and it feels like it. Yeah, we're always looking for feedback, so let us know how you felt about this this format. I know it's kind of a little bit more loosey-goosey, but I think that gave us some more room for some side conversations. So yeah, always let us know feedback. Or if you're like, guys, that was a huge waste of time, I could have gone to lunch. Let us know that too. It's all about the community here. Let's see. Chris, you ran away with it. 1 comma, everybody knows the rules. Crushed it there. So do you want to keep it a surprise for next month, or are you going to go through the filters now? We don't have an SOP for this necessarily.
Yeah, I think I'll keep it a surprise.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Cool. So that's, in addition to our topic next month, that is your big hook to join us again next month is Chad will be wearing a silly filter, which, what else do you need? We got about 5 minutes left. I'm dropping huge fat ums all over the place, which tells me I'm out of content to talk about. I think we're going to do a blog follow-up post with this, as well as having a, our YouTube channel always has like the live stream that you can revisit. I don't think we have anything crazy that we're asking for. I don't think we have the blog follow-up yet. We are back on schedule, which is probably the biggest news. We try and do the first Friday of every month. So this was a quick turnaround, but that means that our next meetup will be on September 6th. So mark your calendars for that. We'll get the calendar invites out in the next couple weeks here. That's Sean's birthday, so we've got a lot to celebrate on the 6th. So, huge Launchpad meetup. That Launchpad meetup is also going to bring us pretty close to JNUC. So we might as well start chit-chatting about JNUC a little bit. I know we've got some presentations at JNUC. I think I saw another one of our Dan Lawrence has a presentation at JNUC. We will all be at JNUC, so feel free to reach out if you want to meet up. We'll be doing some sort of Rocketman happy hour, and we'll have stuff at our booth. We'll have another booth this year. We made some sweet Launchpad t-shirts. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but we'll be giving those out. So if you're at JNUC, definitely stop by to at very least grab a t-shirt. I think that's all we've got this month. That was fun. I think we should do that again. Thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah. Make sure you join for next month because we have SOFA, which I'm super excited for, with Henry Stammerja, Johan, and Alistair Banks, who, I don't know if it's a secret, but he's Mr. Macintosh, which I'm pretty excited for.
Ooh. Yeah, we are back to 60 minutes of content squeezed into 57 minutes next month. So definitely join up. It's going to be a great presentation. Mr. Mac is the man. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a great weekend. We're Rocketman Tech. I don't know. I feel like I'm supposed to say that. We'll see you all next month, if not sooner. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. We have new episodes on the first Friday of every month. If you'd like to join our session live, visit the link in the description to get on our mailing list. And if you're looking to get the most out of your Jamf server, visit rocketman.tech to set up a meeting with one of our Jamf experts. That's rocketman.tech.